Some stories aren't meant to be told. They're meant to trap you, consume you, and make you a part of them. Pinnacle Vale isn't just a place. It's a memory that remembers you back. Will you dare to watch and risk becoming part of its story? The Town with Paper Skin. Part 1, Pinnacle Vale. They say some places aren't abandoned. They're waiting for the right eyes to look back, waiting for the right voice to read their names again. Pinnacle Vale was one of those places. We'd heard about it in whispers. An old mining town in the Arizona high desert, said to have burned to the ground in 1911. No survivors, no cause, just a fire that swallowed a town whole and left the land, scorched and silent. But that wasn't what we found. We were a small documentary crew, me, Jane, the host and producer. Ty handled logistics. Casey managed sound and Luis worked the camera. We were driving into what the GPS marked as nothing, a dirt road coiling through the sandstone hills, under a sky that never seemed to move. The road stopped without warning, just a ridge and beyond it, Pinnacle Vale. It stood there like it had been waiting, not burned, not crumbled, preserved. Houses with weather-worn paint but intact roofs, a saloon sign hanging crookedly but whole, a church steeple casting its shadow over the dry street like it was still Sunday. We stepped out of the van into heat so dry it felt hollow. The wind carried nothing but dust. No birds, no insects, just silence. We entered the first house together. The door creaked open like it had never been locked. Inside, the air was still. A dining table sat in the center, plates arranged perfectly, silverware tarnished but unmoved. A child's cup rested at the edge, the name Millie etched into it in careful, loving strokes. Dust coated everything, but thinly, not like a century of neglect, more like a week. Casey touched the wall, and the wallpaper flaked off under, his fingers curling like dry skin. Beneath it was something pinned in place, glinting faintly. It looked like parchment at first, translucent, thin, stretched tight over the boards, veined. It was warm. Luis filmed it up close, saying it looked like human skin. Casey laughed nervously. Ty didn't say anything. We found more of it in the next house, nailed into walls, hanging like old scrolls. Some had faint writing scrawled across them, illegible at first. But if you stared long enough, it made sense. Words half burned into the tissue. Phrases like, "They wouldn't let us leave," and "The story must end." One read, "She's still writing." I started to feel it then. That sense that something was watching. Not from the windows, not from the shadows, from the town itself, like it was reading us back. That night we camped just outside the town limits. None of us wanted to sleep in the buildings. Ty built a fire. Casey kept glancing over his shoulder. Luis was quiet, fiddling with his camera settings. We recorded the day's footage. I tried to explain how none of it made sense. The town hadn't burned. The wood was intact, furniture undisturbed. It was like everyone had just stood up from dinner and walked into the desert without opening the doors. Then Luis got up, said he wanted to grab some night shots. He took his camera and walked back toward town. We waited. An hour passed, then 2. His walkie was dead. Ty and I went looking. We found the general store door swinging open. Inside, the shelves were still, stocked with empty tins and rusted tins. A counter dusted in powder. The back wall was covered in a new sheet of parchment, larger than the others, still damp, still warm. And below it, on the floor, was Luis's camera. I picked it up. It was still recording. When I reviewed the footage, I saw Luis inside the store, sweeping his light across the shelves. Then he turned the camera toward the wall. The parchment shimmered. It moved, not like it was blowing in wind, but like it was breathing, expanding, contracting. Then, a whisper. Just 3 words. "Tell our story." The footage cut out. We stood in that store, staring at the parchment, and I swear I saw something behind it. A shape. A face. stretched beneath the surface, mouth open in a scream, eyes wide and wet. We didn't sleep that night. Pinnacle Vale wasn't burned. It was preserved, and now it had Louise. Part 2. Paper that breathes. We searched until the sky turned that strange desert violet, the kind of color that makes shadows feel longer than they are. Mason was gone. His last words crackling over our radio were, "I think it's watching me." That was 3 hours ago. We split into pairs. Kat and I moved toward the schoolhouse, the others swept the back half of town. I remember how brittle the air felt, dry but heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm that never comes. Every window we passed stared back at us, panes clouded in sand and ash. Pinnacle Vale wasn't just abandoned, it was listening. The schoolhouse was missing half its roof. Sunlight speared through, casting dusty beams over rows of desks etched with names long forgotten. A chalkboard hung crooked on the wall, still faintly marked with arithmetic lessons. But it was the smell. That hit me first, and not rot, not mold. Something like burnt hair and parchment. There were more sheets nailed to the walls, just like the ones in the houses, translucent, veined. And when I touched one, it twitched. I stepped back. Kat froze beside me, wide-eyed, her camera lens slowly rising. Then she whispered, "Look." Each parchment now had faint impressions on them. Not ink, not scratches. Faces. Some with open mouths, others grimacing. Their features were shallow, like wax pressed thin, but unmistakably human. I could feel something under my skin crawling to get out. We turned on the sound recorder, just in case. That's when we heard it. A whisper. Not words exactly. More like the dry brushing of paper dragged across paper, but layered, as if dozens of voices were trying to speak at once. The recorder caught it even louder than our ears could, dozens of voices hissing through static. I wanted to leave then. Kat, too. But near the teacher's desk, something was waiting for us. It was a journal, blackened around the edges, bound, in what I desperately hoped was leather. Inside, the ink had faded, but a few entries were still legible. One read, "They said the judgment was coming. Not fire, not plague. Memory itself. So the elders told us, write it down. Every sin, every cruelty. Etch it into your skin, and when the time comes, the paper will carry the truth, and we will be spared." Another entry, scrawled and rushed, ended with, "My daughter won't stop peeling. She says the paper is growing from her spine. We wrapped her in cloth, but the words won't stop. They keep writing themselves." That's when we heard the scream. It wasn't far, maybe 50 yards east, near the remnants of what used to be a general store. We ran. Dust kicked up under our boots, and every building we passed seemed smaller, quieter, more collapsed than before. Chris was lying in the sand. Pale. Eyes rolled back. His arms, they were covered in strips. Strips of something pale, translucent, and twitching. Not wrapped like bandages. No. They were fused. Thin flaps of skin like paper, growing from his arms in spiral patterns, words written across each one in looping cursive. We tried to tear one off, it bled. He screamed. We carried him back to the van. But something's wrong with the town. The sky hasn't shifted in hours. The sun hasn't moved. And when we look behind us, the road we came in on is gone. Just more desert. Inside the van, Chris sleeps. Or maybe he's dreaming with his eyes open. Every few minutes, he mouths something we can't hear. We played back the whisper recording. This time, it said our names. Kat wants to burn the schoolhouse down. I told her maybe it's time we burned the whole damn town. But I'm scared, because I think the story isn't finished, and someone, something, wants us to write the rest. Part 3, The Archivist. We woke to silence. No birds, no wind. Just the crunch of sand as we stepped outside the van and saw that it was gone. The van was gone. Not stolen, not broken down, simply not there. The tire tracks leading to where it sat yesterday just vanished a few feet out. Beyond that, it was only dry desert, flat and blank. Every GPS screen we checked had turned to static. Even the compasses spun uselessly, circling like they were trying to find north in a place where direction didn't matter anymore. Kat stood there with her camera not filming, just holding it like a weapon. I think we all felt it then. The town wasn't letting us leave. Not yet. Not until something was finished. That's when we noticed the building we hadn't seen before. At the very center of Pinnacle Vale, past a sunken well and across a broken square of cobblestone stood the courthouse. It shouldn't have been there. We'd walked through that part of town a dozen times, and yet here it was now, rising from the dust like it had always belonged. A block of red stone, cracked down the middle, with ivy, actual ivy, climbing its front like veins. The aisle, wooden doors creaked open before we touched them. Inside it was cooler. Still, too still. The walls were lined with black and white photographs, dozens of them, hung in cracked frames, all of people, townsfolk by the look of them, in suits and dresses, standing stiffly in front of buildings long since burned or buried. Their faces looked strained, not smiling, but not neutral either. Expressions caught halfway through fear. I stepped closer. The hairs on my arms lifted. In one frame, a man stood with his hands folded. When I blinked, he was holding a book. I looked again, and the woman beside him was now looking at me. We kept walking. The courtroom had one long bench and a judge's chair raised high behind a podium. That's where we saw it. The figure. It was seated, slumped, yet poised. Like it had just sat down to listen and was waiting patiently for someone to speak. It looked waxen, skin pale and stretched, like someone sculpted it in candlelight and then forgot to finish. Its head was cocked slightly to the side, and although the eyes were closed, the mouth was parted, just enough to see that there were no teeth inside. Just more parchment, rolled and folded, tucked behind the lips like scrolls. Chris stepped toward it, too far. Kat whispered not to. He didn't listen. His hand rose slightly, like he was being pulled forward by strings. Then he froze. We didn't hear anything, but Chris began to speak. Quietly, clearly, not his words. He said, Article 4, Subsection C. The petitioner pleads by writ of parchment, skin folded and bled for remembrance. He blinked hard like he was waking from a dream, looked at us with wide, terrified eyes, and then said, I didn't say that. I didn't say any of that. Kat was filming again, but her camera screen had gone dark, yet the red light still blinked. When she rewound the footage, it wasn't the courtroom. It wasn't even us. It was a black room filled with stacked shelves, skin-thin pages fluttering from hooks, and a voice whispering in reverse. On the wall behind the judge's chair, more photographs. Larger, a group shot. I stepped close. There, we were, the five of us, in period clothing, standing with blank eyes among dozens of unfamiliar faces. My mouth was open. I was screaming, but no sound. That's when the lights dimmed, not flickered, dimmed, as if the sun outside was being pulled away like a curtain. Shadows stretched across the courtroom like fingers, and the archivist moved. No sound, no shifting of wood, just one moment sitting, and the next, rising. It stood taller than it should. Head still tilted, shoulders cracked as it straightened, and the mouth opened wider. Pages, dozens of them wet and curled, slid out onto the floor like a tongue made of stories too awful to read aloud. Then it took a step forward, and we ran. We didn't stop to scream, or to breathe. We just ran. But I swear, as we fled the courthouse, I heard the photos whispering behind us, a chorus of dry paper mouths echoing a verdict already written. We remember you. Part 4. The script of flesh. We ran until the dust stung our throats and the sun cut shadows in half. There was no sign of the courthouse behind us anymore. It was gone again, swallowed, like the town rearranged itself when we weren't looking. Kat was crying. Chris wouldn't speak. His lips kept moving, silently repeating that strange phrase from the courthouse like a prayer he didn't know he was saying. We needed somewhere to hide, somewhere quiet, somewhere that felt less alive. We found the chapel. It stood on a ridge, whitewashed and brittle. The steeple was broken, its cross half buried in sand, but the door swung open like it had been waiting. Inside, the air was thick, stale with incense and old secrets. And the walls, God, the walls weren't wood. They were stitched, from floor to ceiling, sewn together pages of something too thin to be paper. Not parchment, not leather. Something else. Something that shifted when we looked too long. Each strip covered in tiny, perfect writing. We approached the nearest section. It read like a journal. But it wasn't my journal. It was mine. Word for word, thoughts I had never written, but remembered thinking. Memories. I never spoke aloud. Moments from childhood, guilt I'd buried, things no one else could know. It was all there. Kat found one too. Her wall spoke of her father, the time she stole his gun, held it for an hour under her bed, wondering what it would feel like to stop hurting. She hadn't told a soul. Chris just stood in the middle of the chapel. The whispers had returned, louder now, like wind trapped behind walls. They circled him. He knelt. I thought he was praying, until I saw the knife. It wasn't ours. It looked ancient, bone-handled, rusted along the edge. Where it had come from, I didn't know. But Chris held it steady and dragged the tip across his forearm in one clean line. Blood welled, but instead of dripping, it stretched. The blood didn't run. It pulled, forming into words as it seeped from him. I lied. That's what he carved. I lied. Then another line, another word. Samantha. He was sobbing now, not from pain, from relief. Like this was something he needed to do. We tried to stop him, but he fought. Not with strength, with conviction, like it was sacred, like he was writing scripture. By the time Kat knocked the blade from his hand, both arms were covered in bloody confessions curling into words that didn't dry. They absorbed, vanished into the skin like it was ink on paper. That's when the chapel began to hum, a low vibration, deep enough to shudder bone. We looked up at the altar. There, nailed in place, was a single page. It wasn't yellowed like the rest, it was fresh, wet, almost still living. It twitched slightly when the wind passed through a cracked window. Words were written in blood so dark it looked black. It said, "Tomorrow, one will open the door. One will beg for silence. One will be taken. And one will finish the story." We didn't speak. The whispers turned to voices now, full sentences layered over each other in a dozen dialects. Some old, some new, some not quite human. Chris was rocking back and forth. Kat grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice. Then we heard it. A slow, dragging step. The sound of something heavy pulling itself up the chapel's stone steps. The archivist. We couldn't see it, not yet. But we felt it. Felt the way the chapel bent toward its presence, how the pages on the walls began to flutter like leaves in a storm. Some peeled free entirely, drifting through the air like dead moths. One landed at my feet. I picked it up, trembling, and turned it over. It was my handwriting. Not memories, not thoughts. It was tomorrow. Me, waking up alone. Kat screaming, my name. Chris gone, the town swallowing the chapel. And the last line, burned into the bottom of the page, Krun said, "Do not let it end unwritten." I dropped it. Outside, something whispered my name. Only my name. And it was my own voice saying, "It. Part 5. Burn it all." We couldn't sleep. Not after what we saw in the chapel. Not after reading our own futures etched in skin. Kat kept pacing, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her soul in place. Chris hadn't spoken. Since the writing stopped on his arms, he just stared at the pulpit, whispering under his breath. I watched the wall of pages tremble, shiver, as if they were breathing. Every so often one would twitch, like it was listening. That's when Catty said it. We have to burn it. The words felt like a sin in that place, like saying them out loud might call something forward. But she was right. We took what we could. Candles from the chapel, old hymnals, scraps of the parchment pages that seemed too eager to peel away. We built a pile in the center of the room and we lit the match. For a moment, nothing happened, just smoke curling like incense, then flames, real flames, then screaming, not ours. The parchment screamed, high-pitched, agonizing, like dozens of voices layered together, caught between fire and flesh. The pages writhed, folding and curling like they were trying to escape. One even leapt from the pile. It slapped across Chris's leg, burning into him. He screamed too, grabbing it and tearing it away, leaving a patch of red, bubbling skin. The chapel groaned, not creaked, groaned, like the building itself was in pain. Blood seeped from the seams in the walls, thick, dark, almost tar-like. It dripped down the scripture, smearing the words, making them blur and twist. Outside, the world changed. The town began to move. We looked out through the broken stained glass window and saw the structures bleeding, crimson running down cracked clapboards, roof tiles curled like dead fingernails, and the shadows. Oh God, the shadows. They moved independently now. They stretched against the sun, bent in impossible directions. One leaned up from behind the old post office and watched us. It didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. Then, the ground shook. A long, low rumble like something buried deep had turned over in its sleep. The chapel floor split, right down the aisle. It opened like a wound. Beneath, stairs descended, carved in bone, wet to the touch. We didn't speak, just descended. We had nowhere else to go. Below the town was something worse. A library, not of books, of flesh, tomes bound in skin, shelves made of spine and gristle. The air was thick with rot and a strange sweetness like spoiled fruit and perfume. Each book had a name, and each name was one of ours. Kat found hers first. The cover was stitched tight with red thread. She opened it. Inside were her memories. Her sins, her regrets, but rewritten, twisted. The time she ran from home. In the book, she killed her sister. The boyfriend she lost in the river. In the book, she pushed him. I didn't do this, she whispered. I didn't. But the book didn't care. Chris didn't hesitate. He walked deeper into the shelves until he found a quill made of bone, dipped it in ink that smelled like blood and iron, and began to write in his book. This is the only way out, he muttered. Rewrite the story, make it forget. I tried to stop him, but he looked up at me, eyes glassy, and said, if we don't give it what it wants, it writes for us. Then the lights dimmed, and the air filled with whispers again. No, not whispers. Voices, thousands. They came from the stairwell. The archivist had followed us. It stood at the top of the stairs, its head too large, its body waxen and stretched, like melted candles. In its hand was no gavel. It held a knife, not metal, not stone, bone. Its voice wasn't one. It was all of them. Ours. Others. Screaming, laughing, pleading. The archivist stepped forward, and the shelves groaned. Books fell. Pages fluttered. Chris ran, deeper into the stacks. The archivist turned its head to follow him, but slowly, almost as if savoring the movement. I reached for Kat. She didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the book in her hands. She whispered, "My ending's already written." And she began to bleed, not from a cut, but from the words forming across her chest. They carved themselves slowly, letter by letter, shaping into sentences. her story rewriting without her consent. And mine. I felt heat behind my eyes. Something tugged at my memory. I hadn't come here for the documentary. That wasn't the real reason. I came to disappear, to bury something, to leave something unwritten. But the town knew. The book waited, and the archivist kept walking. One hand a knife, the other reaching for a pen. Part 6. Their names were never theirs. The air was heavier now, suffocating. It wasn't just fear. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting. The library, with its grotesque shelves of sinew and bone, pulsated faintly, alive, with a rhythm I couldn't ignore. My footsteps echoed against the wet, marrow-slick floor as I walked deeper into the labyrinth of flesh-bound books. Each step dragged me closer to the heart of Pinnacle Vale, the truth I could no longer deny. Past shelves upon shelves of names etched into warped, leathery spines. Some were familiar: Luis, Kat, Chris. Others were strangers. All were prisoners. I ran my fingers across one cover, the name carved crudely into it. The surface was warm, pulsing faintly, and when I touched it, I heard a voice. It whispered, "Help me." I recoiled, stumbling backward into another shelf. A cascade of books fell around me, releasing faint, anguished cries as they hit the ground. Their pages fluttered open, revealing stories, lives that had been rewritten, twisted, erased, each one a person consumed by the town. Then I saw it. At the center of the room stood a pedestal made of gnarled wood and bone. On it rested a single book, pristine compared to the others. Its cover was blank, but the pages inside were waiting, eager. The quill beside it, carved from a shard of bone, glimmered with wet ink that smelled like iron and ash. The archivist was here. Its shadow stretched across the walls before its body emerged from the dark. It moved in jerks and tremors, a grotesque marionette controlled by unseen strings. The parchment draped across its face shifted, revealing glimpses of blank eyes and a mouth that leaked dark ichor. It pointed to the book. I knew what it wanted. My name. The air vibrated with a cacophony of voices, whispers of those who had come before me. They begged, they screamed, they laughed, all of them urging me to write. Write it down. They hissed. Join us. Stay. I felt the pull, an irresistible force drawing me closer to the pedestal. The quill lifted on its own, hovering above the blank page. The archivist didn't speak, but its intentions were clear. Write my name, and I would become part of the town, trapped forever, but alive within its memory. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the quill. The temptation was overwhelming. To live forever, even as a shadow, was better than disappearing completely, wasn't it? Then I remembered. The chapel, the wall of stitched pages, the words that had carved themselves into Kat's chest. They weren't just stories, they were lies, twisted versions of the truth meant to trap us, to feed the town. Pinnacle Vale wasn't a place, it was a construct, a parasite, a prison built from the memories and identities of those it consumed, and I was its final victim. No, I whispered, stepping back. You don't own me. The archivist froze, its head tilting in confusion. The quill fell to the floor, splattering ink like blood. The whispers grew louder, angrier, as if the entire library was alive and enraged. Write, the voices demanded. Write your name. I turned to the shelves, to the books that contained the souls of my friends and countless others. There, pages fluttered violently, releasing shrieks that pierced my ears. I grabbed one of the fallen books, Chris's, and held it above the flickering lantern I had carried from the chapel. The archivist lunged, but I was faster. The flame caught the edge of the book and it roared to life. The pages screamed as they burned, curling into ash that smelled of charred flesh. I grabbed another book, then another, feeding them to the fire as the room filled with smoke and wails of agony. The shelves themselves began to twist and writhe, their grotesque forms collapsing under the weight of their destruction. The archivist's movements became frantic, desperate. It clawed at the air, its parchment face peeling away to reveal a void, a gaping maw that devoured light itself. But it couldn't stop me. I was burning everything. I reached the pedestal. The blank book was untouched, unscathed by the chaos around it. I picked up the quill, dipped it in ink, and hesitated one final time. I could write my name. I could become part of the town and live forever in its memory. Or I could end it. I turned the quill on myself, carving my name into my arm. Blood pooled and dripped onto the blank page, but I didn't stop. With every letter, I felt the town weaken. Its grip on me loosened. The voices grew faint, the walls began to crumble, and the archivist let out a final, mournful wail before dissolving into ash. As the last of Pinnacle Vale collapsed around me, I stumbled into the desert. The sun was rising, casting long shadows across the dunes. The town was gone. Not a single trace remained. I looked down at my arm. My name was still there, bleeding but fading, the letters dissolving into my skin like they had never existed. The camera in my bag beeped, its battery dying. I turned it on one last time and pointed it at myself. I remember now, I whispered, my voice trembling. I was never real. The screen flickered, then darkness and silence. The story doesn't end here. Pinnacle Vale is just the beginning, and what's coming next, you'll want to be prepared. Like this video, subscribe, and stay close, because some stories have a way of finding you when you least expect it.